Who do you think you are, questioning me like that? The older man's voice sliced through the air, his words bristling with indignation, every syllable jagged with the sting of pride. His eyes narrowed, searching for a flinch, a weakness in me. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. I met his gaze, unwavering, my voice steady as I replied, "Mr. Ingwen, I'm here to help. But if you want my help, I need everything. Every detail, no matter how small or painful." He exhaled, the sound more like a scoff than a sigh, bitterness etched into the lines of his face. For a moment, he looked away, jaw clenched, wrestling with the humiliation of needing something from someone he clearly didn't expect to challenge him. He shook his head, pride wounded but not obliterated, and didn't argue. In that brief hesitation, I caught a glimpse of the man beneath the bluster. A man used to being obeyed, not questioned, and now forced to reckon with the fact that his power had limits. "I know what it's like to have your power stripped away. My name's Danielle. I chose that name, deliberately, when I was a child, discarding the one my parents gave me along with everything else they left behind. I'm 30 now, an attorney with my own practice, and I never once used my family's last name. I built my identity from scratch, brick by painstaking brick, refusing to let the past dictate who I could become. My entire career is rooted in resilience, in the stubborn refusal to let old wounds define me. Every case I take, every obstacle I overcome, is another testament to the fact that I survived what was meant to break me. I was 6 when my parents abandoned me. One morning, without warning, they dropped me at an orphanage and walked away. No backward glance, no explanations, no promises. They left me standing in a strange hallway, the air thick with bleach and the deeper, invisible scent of loss. For years I tried to make sense of it, rifling through memories for any sign of what I'd done wrong. Was I too loud, too quiet, too needy, too independent? I turned the questions over and over in my mind, desperate to find a logic that would make the rejection hurt less. But there was none. Now, nearly 25 years later, those same people sat across from me in my office, faces older but still unmistakably familiar, asking for my legal expertise. They didn't even recognize me, the daughter they'd left behind, now grown into a woman they'd never known. Their voices trembled with anxiety and hope, oblivious to the history written in every line of my face. I watched them, feeling an odd mixture of detachment and disbelief. Fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. The last memory I have of my parents is seared into my mind with the clarity of a recurring nightmare. My mother dressed me in my best yellow dress, the one with the white daisies stitched along the hem, and brushed my hair with almost ceremonial care. She held my hand tightly as we walked into the orphanage, sunlight glaring off the pavement outside. Inside, the world shrank to dim corridors and the low hum of voices that never sounded warm. My mother knelt before me, her hands smoothing my hair one last time. "You'll love it here," she whispered, her words shaped by a false gentleness, her eyes already elsewhere. "They'll take such good care of you." I clung to her, confusion gnawing at my insides. "When are you coming back?" I asked, my voice small but insistent. She hesitated, her gaze darting away, then forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Soon, sweetheart. Be good, okay?" Then she stood up, turned and left. I remember watching the door long after it closed, refusing to cry. I stood there for hours, hope slowly draining away until all that was left was the cold certainty that I was alone. The orphanage became my universe, its routines and rules shaping my days. Survival was an art I learned quickly. I stopped asking about my parents, stopped expecting answers from the caretakers who looked right through me. The other children were caught in their own private griefs. We learned not to poke at each other's wounds. Books became my lifeline. I devoured stories that carried me far from those bleak walls, imagining myself into worlds where little girls mattered. Every night, lying in my narrow bunk, I'd stare into the darkness and tally my supposed faults. Was I too clumsy? Too slow? Not pretty enough, not clever enough, not enough of anything to be worth keeping? The questions churned inside me, fueling a fire that would never quite burn out. At first, the pain was raw, but over time it hardened into something sharper, a determination to prove them wrong. I promised myself I would never be the disposable child they saw in me. I didn't learn the real reason for their abandonment until I was 10. The orphanage director, Mrs. Patel, called me into her cramped, cluttered office one rainy afternoon. She'd always seemed to watch me with a special kind of pity, her eyes softening whenever she passed me in the halls. That day, her tone was gentler than usual as she sat me down. "Danielle," she began, her voice edged with fatigue and kindness, "you're old enough now to understand why your parents brought you here." My heart pounded as I listened. "Your parents come from a very traditional family. When your little brother was born, they believed it was their duty to devote everything to him as the family's heir." Her words landed with a dull thud. Heavy, inevitable, incomprehensible. "But I'm their daughter," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Why didn't they want me to?" Mrs. Patel shook her head, sympathy shining in her tired eyes. "It wasn't about you, Danielle. It was about them, their beliefs, their need to fit into a mold that never made room for you. I wish I could tell you it made sense, but it doesn't. It's wrong." That night, lying awake, the truth settled over me like a suffocating blanket. My parents hadn't left because I'd failed them. They left because I was a girl, an expendable inconvenience in a world that prized sons above daughters. The rejection that had once threatened to hollow me out instead became a source of fuel. I stopped seeking explanations and started focusing on the future. I poured myself into my studies, staying late in the library, chasing every opportunity that might give me an edge. I would not be the ghost they tried to erase. I would become someone impossible to ignore. At school, I became a fixture in every classroom, always the first to volunteer, always the last to leave. I entered competitions, won scholarships, and caught the attention of teachers who saw that beneath my quiet determination was an unyielding will to succeed. One of them, Mrs. Lin, pulled me aside after class one afternoon. "Danielle," she said, her voice steady with conviction, "you're going to go far. You have the kind of drive people can't teach. You just need the right doors to open." Her words stuck with me. I started researching scholarships, internships, anything that could get me out of the life I'd been handed. I treated obstacles like puzzles, setbacks like lessons. For every no I received, I pushed twice as hard until I found a yes. By 16, I was winning national competitions, my name whispered in the halls as someone destined to break the mold. And then one morning a letter arrived, thick, embossed, unmistakably important. It was from a prestigious university, offering me a full scholarship. I remember holding it in my hands, the paper trembling as I realized I'd done it. I was leaving the past behind, stepping into a future I had carved for myself. For the first time, I felt the weight of possibility pressing against my chest, fierce and exhilarating. Everything I had endured, the loneliness, the rejection, the endless nights spent proving my worth, had led me to this threshold. I wasn't just enough. I was more than they could have ever imagined. My story was finally my own. When that letter came in the mail, I held it like it was a golden ticket, my hands trembling, my heart pounding in my chest. It was more than just a college acceptance. It was a lifeline, my chance to break free from the narrow corridors and whispered secrets of the orphanage. For years I'd watched other kids leave, some with hope, some with resignation, but this was my turn. The staff organized a small celebration, balloons, store-bought cupcakes, and smiles that felt genuine. Mrs. Patel, who had always quietly championed me, pulled me into a fierce hug that left me breathless. "You've earned this, Danielle," she whispered, her eyes shining with pride. "Now go show the world what you can do." In that moment I felt seen, not just as another orphan but as someone with a future. Stepping onto the college campus was like being swept up in a whirlwind. For the first time I was surrounded by people who seemed to believe in me, or at least saw potential instead of pity. It was overwhelming. Lecture halls buzzing with energy, study groups that lasted late into the night, professors who called me by name and noticed when I spoke up. I threw myself into everything. Internships that tested my resolve, leadership positions that forced me to find my voice, endless rounds of coffee-fueled debates in crowded libraries. Every success felt like a tiny rebellion against the statistics that said kids like me rarely made it this far. I learned quickly that hard work opened doors, but grit kept them open. My classmates seemed drawn to my intensity, maybe sensing that for me, failure wasn't an option. I said yes to every opportunity, even when it left me exhausted. I was determined to make my mark, to prove, mostly to myself, that I belonged. Law school was another storm entirely, one I entered willingly, craving the challenge. The pressure was relentless, but I thrived on it, channeling all the emotions I'd bottled up over the years into my studies. My past became a source of strength, not shame. Every time I read a case about someone on the margins, I remembered what it felt like to be voiceless, and I promised myself I'd never let anyone else feel invisible if I could help it. By graduation, my efforts paid off in ways I'd barely dared to imagine. Offers from prestigious firms across the country, the kind of places I'd once only read about in magazines. I chose New York, a city as restless and ambitious as I was, and joined a firm dedicated to serving underserved communities. It was demanding work, often messy and underfunded, but deeply rewarding. For the first time, I felt like I was using my story to make a tangible difference. I knew what it meant to be overlooked, and I was determined to be the advocate I'd always needed. Even as I advanced, earning respect and new responsibilities, I rarely spoke about my past. Not because I was ashamed, if anything I was fiercely proud of how far I'd come, but because I wanted colleagues and clients to see Danielle the lawyer, not just Danielle the orphan. Each new achievement was a silent victory, a way of rewriting the story I'd been handed. It was during my second year at the firm, juggling a particularly complex housing rights case, that I met Mark. At first, he was just another sharp mind in a conference room full of them. Confident, easygoing, with a smile that softened the edges of even the toughest arguments. As the weeks wore on, I found myself drawn to his warmth and quick wit, the way he could find humor in the chaos of deadlines and setbacks. He made the long hours feel lighter, the burdens less heavy. Our relationship began almost without either of us realizing it. Late nights at the office blurred into shared takeout meals, and what started as shop talk gradually turned into deeper conversations. About childhood, ambition, the secret fears we carried. I was cautious, instinctively protective of the walls I'd built to survive. Letting someone in felt risky, like inviting the possibility of loss. But Mark was patient, never pushing, simply offering his presence. Slowly, I let myself lean on him. One night, after we'd finally won our case, he walked me home through rain-slicked streets. At my apartment door, he turned to me and said, "You know, I think you're the most driven person I've ever met. But sometimes, it's okay to let someone else help carry the weight." His words settled deep inside me. For the first time in years, I considered the possibility that maybe I didn't have to shoulder everything by myself. As our bond deepened, we started talking about the future, our dreams, our fears, the life we wanted to build. I hesitated to imagine a family. The idea carried both longing and apprehension, shaped by memories of what I'd lost and what I'd never had. Mark wanted kids, and gradually I realized that I did too. The thought of creating a home, a safe place where love was freely given, was both exhilarating and terrifying. I was haunted by the fear of repeating the mistakes of my own parents, but with Mark, hope started to outweigh doubt. Reality, though, was never far behind. The cost of living in New York, the weight of student loans, the unpredictable hours of our jobs. Planning for a family felt daunting. We both worked hard, but the numbers never quite added up to the security I craved. Sitting at the kitchen table with Mark, poring over spreadsheets and savings calculators, I felt the old urgency rise in me, a determination to do more, to ensure our future was solid. Mark always reminded me gently that we were a team. "We'll figure it out together," he'd say, squeezing my hand. But deep down, I carried the same drive that had gotten me this far. The belief that survival depended on never letting up. I loved my work, helping clients who had nowhere else to turn, standing in courtrooms and giving a voice to those who'd been ignored. It was work that mattered, that made me feel connected to something larger than myself. But meaning didn't pay the bills, and each month, I felt the gap between where we were and where we hoped to be. I started to realize that passion alone wouldn't build the stable foundation I wanted for our future children. One evening, surrounded by the comforting clutter of case files and empty coffee mugs, it hit me with startling clarity. Something had to change. The decision wasn't easy. I'd spent years forging an identity in public interest law, fighting for causes that felt personal. But as I thought about the life Mark and I envisioned, a home filled with laughter, a sense of security for our kids, I knew I couldn't ignore the practicalities anymore. That night, over dinner, I finally voiced what had been swirling in my mind. "I've been thinking," I said, my fork tracing idle patterns on my plate, "about applying to bigger firms. Maybe trying corporate law." The words felt strange, heavy with the weight of possibility and compromise. Mark looked at me, concern flickering across his face. "Are you sure? I know how much you love what you're doing now." "I do," I admitted. "But loving it isn't enough. If we want to build a family, we need to be realistic. I want to give our kids the kind of stability I never had, the kind I used to dream about." He reached across the table, his fingers warm around mine. "If it's what you want, I'm with you. I know you can make it anywhere, and I'll be here every step of the way." In that moment, I felt a strange mix of relief and trepidation. Changing course wasn't failure. It was growth, another chapter in a story that was still being written. So I opened my laptop and started updating my resume, determined to carve out a future that honored both where I'd come from and where I hoped to go. The journey wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. As I pored over information about larger firms, an unexpected undercurrent tugged at me, one I'd tried to ignore for years: thoughts of my family. The ones who had left me behind. For so long I'd carefully constructed a wall, convincing myself I didn't need them, that I was better off forging my own path. But now, with the prospect of starting my own family drawing closer, cracks began to appear in that old stubborn armor. I found myself wondering, who were they really? What kind of life did they build once I was gone? Did they ever think about me, about the daughter they'd chosen to forget? The truth was, my knowledge of them was little more than a collection of rumors and half-remembered stories, pieced together over the years like a patchwork quilt. I recalled Mrs. Patel, my caretaker at the orphanage, once mentioning in a hushed voice that my family was wealthy, members of a respected, even celebrated community. That revelation had always ached, deeper than I wanted to admit. They hadn't left because of poverty or desperation. They'd left because they simply didn't want me. The sting of that truth never quite faded, and yet slowly curiosity began to outweigh the bitterness I'd nursed for so long. I realized I couldn't keep running from it. The questions gnawed at me, relentless and insistent. I needed answers not just for myself but for the future I hoped to build. The next morning, nerves jangling, I picked up the phone and called the orphanage. Mrs. Patel had retired, but a new director, Claire, answered. She had a warm, reassuring tone, the kind that made it easier to breathe. "We still have some of your records," she told me. "Why don't you come in? I'd love to talk and see how we can help." I agreed, though I felt as though the ground had shifted beneath me. When I hung up, my hands shook. My mind raced with what I might discover. Still, I knew I couldn't turn back. Days later, I found myself standing in front of those familiar iron gates. Years had passed, but the sight of the faded brick walls, the echoes of children's laughter drifting through the air, brought memories flooding back, some comforting, others sharp and unwelcome. Claire greeted me at the door with a smile that made the moment less daunting. "Come on in, Danielle," she said, her voice gentle as she led me to her office. She'd pulled together what records she could find, a slim folder battered at the edges, thick with history. I sat down, heart pounding, and opened it with trembling hands. We sifted through the yellowed pages together. "Your parents," Claire began, careful and kind, "came from a very well-off family. They owned several businesses, were quite influential in their community." She paused, her eyes searching mine, making sure I was okay. "Money wasn't the reason they left you." Hearing it spoken aloud was like a punch to the gut, even though I'd always suspected as much. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Is there anything else you can tell me? I managed, my voice barely steady. After a moment's hesitation, Claire slid a photocopied newspaper article across the desk. I stared at it, a glossy feature on the Thean family, all smiles and success. My parents stood beside a young man, unmistakably my brother, their arms linked. They looked every bit the perfect family. Happy, content, complete. I felt like a ghost, a missing piece no one acknowledged, a secret they'd chosen to erase. When I left the orphanage that afternoon, I was torn in half. Part of me burned for answers, desperate to understand the choices that shaped my life. Another part, maybe the wiser part, just wanted to let go, to stop letting the past dictate my future. What good would it do to chase a family that had already made their decision? I'd survived, even thrived, without them. I'd built something of my own, piece by hard-won piece. That folder, with all its painful reminders, went into a drawer at home, out of sight. I tried to point my gaze forward. It wasn't easy, but time has a way of dulling old wounds. Soon after, my focus shifted when I landed an offer at one of the top corporate law firms in the city. It was the kind of opportunity I dreamed about. Prestigious, challenging, a place where I could finally prove that I belonged among the best. The salary was more than I'd dared hope for, promising the stability that Mark and I had been chasing for years. When I broke the news to him, he beamed with pride, pulling me into his arms. You did it, Danielle. You earned this. I threw myself into the work, determined to excel. The hours were long and the stakes high, but I thrived on the challenge. Each case was a new test of my resolve, a new way to prove, if only to myself, that I was more than the girl they'd left behind. The demands of the job kept me busy, leaving little room for regret or nostalgia. For a while it seemed like that was enough. I convinced myself I'd made the right choice, that the past could stay buried. Years slipped by, marked by milestones I could never have imagined back in those lonely days at the orphanage. Mark and I welcomed our daughter Mia, a miracle with wide, curious eyes and a laugh that lit up the whole world. Holding her for the first time, I felt something in me shift. Suddenly, the idea of family wasn't an abstract ache, but a living, breathing presence in my arms. I wanted to give Mia everything I'd missed, a home filled with love, stability, and the unshakable assurance that she was wanted, cherished, and safe. Work continued to challenge and fulfill me. I rose quickly through the ranks, soon becoming one of the youngest senior attorneys at the firm. My reputation grew. I became known for my precision, my drive, and my ability to handle even the most complex cases. The pressure was real, but coming home to Mark and Mia made it worthwhile. We carved out our own rituals, bedtime stories, weekend picnics, quiet nights curled up together. Mark was my partner in every sense, steadfast, supportive, always ready to shoulder more when my job demanded too much. Together we built the kind of life I'd once thought impossible, one based on trust, respect, and an unwavering sense of belonging. Yet, in the quietest moments, when I rocked Mia to sleep or watched her chase butterflies in the backyard, the shadows of my past sometimes crept in. I'd think of my parents, of the choices they made, and wonder how anyone could leave their child behind. I'd search Mia's face, feeling fiercely protective, unable to imagine turning away from her. The ache would resurface, sharp and raw, but I did my best to push it aside. I reminded myself that I was no longer defined by loss or rejection. I had a family now, a real one, built not from obligation but from love, choice, and the promise that I would always be there for my daughter. In time, I realized that while the past would always be a part of me, it didn't have to dictate my future. I was free to love, to hope, and to build something better, not in spite of where I came from, but because I understood on the deepest level just how precious family could be. The one that mattered. That morning started like any other. I strolled into my office, coffee in hand, the scent promising just enough energy to push through another day of meetings, research, and the endless grind that came with being the firm's fixer. I barely made it to my chair before my assistant appeared in the doorway. her face bright with excitement that didn't match the hour. "Danielle," she said, her voice almost conspiratorial, "Mr. Roberts wants to see you. He says it's about a new client." Big deal, apparently. I felt a familiar jolt of anticipation ripple through me. New clients always brought a rush, the unknown, the stakes, the chance to prove myself all over again. I'd built my reputation on tackling complex, messy cases no one else wanted to touch. The adrenaline was part of what kept me coming back day after day. I set my coffee down, straightened my blazer, and headed down the hall. Mr. Roberts looked up from a desk buried in paperwork as I entered, fatigue etched into the lines around his eyes. But when he saw me, he managed a small, approving smile. "Good morning, Danielle," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "We've just taken on a new client. Complicated doesn't even begin to cover it. Layers of financial mismanagement, a tangle of lawsuits, possible bankruptcy. The press would have a field day if they caught so much as a whiff, but for now, it's strictly confidential. I want you on it. You're the only one I trust with something this delicate." He slid a thick folder across the desk toward me, his eyes locking with mine. "This is yours now." I took the folder, feeling the weight of it in my hands. A case like this could make or break a career. I flipped it open, my eyes tracing the name at the top of the first page. And then the world seemed to tilt sideways. Ulan Holdings. I stared, the words blurring as memories I'd fought for years to bury surged to the surface. The Orphanage, the headlines, that one yellowed article I'd read over and over as a child. This was the company my parents had built, the company they'd chosen over me. I forced myself to keep my expression neutral. "Thank you," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll get started right away." Back in my office, I closed the door and sat down, the file heavy in my lap. My heart hammered against my ribs, anger and disbelief colliding with a kind of numb wonder. After all this time, I thought, what are the odds? For so long I'd worked to distance myself from everything Ulan Holdings represented. My parents' choices, the pain of abandonment, the feeling of being invisible in my own family. I'd reinvented myself, built a new life from the ground up. Yet here it was, staring back at me across the years, demanding my attention whether I wanted to give it or not. For a while I just sat there, clutching the folder as if letting go would make it all disappear. Part of me wanted to bury the file in a drawer, lock it away and pretend it had never existed. But another part, the part that had kept me going all these years, wanted to tear through every page to understand just how badly things had unraveled and maybe, just maybe, to find answers to questions I'd stopped asking out loud. Eventually I took a deep breath and opened the file. If I was going to make a decision, any decision, I needed the facts. The first pages were brutal. Ulan Holdings was in freefall, the kind of disaster that happened slowly and then all at once. Lawsuits from creditors, business partners, even former employees piled up, each one a new hole punched in the company's hull. Years of mismanagement, risky ventures gone wrong, and a refusal to adapt to a changing world had brought the company to the brink of collapse. Reading the list of grievances, the unpaid debts, the desperate attempts to keep the lights on, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. This was a mess entirely of their own making, yet it was a tragedy all the same. And then, again and again, one name leapt out from the pages. Bonwan. My brother. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong, who was handed every opportunity I'd been denied. It was him, I realized with something like awe, who had been steering the ship these past few years. And it was him who had led it straight onto the rocks. Every reckless investment, every stubborn refusal to listen to advice, every dollar wasted. It was all there, detailed in the cold, clinical language of legal documents, but the story it told was anything but clinical. It was personal. It was the story of a family that had gambled everything on a single favored child, and lost. I leaned back, running a hand over my face. The irony was almost too much to bear. After everything they'd done, after pushing me out, turning their backs, pretending I didn't exist, they were now at the mercy of my expertise. The family who once saw me as expendable was now relying on me as their last hope. I wondered what they would think when they realized who was handling their case. Would they recognize me at all, or would I just be another name on a file? That night, I went home still carrying the folder, almost afraid to let it out of my sight. The apartment smelled of garlic and tomato sauce, and for a moment I just stood in the doorway, watching Mark in the kitchen with Mia. He was swaying slightly, humming under his breath as he stirred the pot, Mia giggling on his hip, her small fingers tangled in his shirt. The sight should have grounded me, reminded me of the life I'd built far away from the shadows of my childhood. But tonight, I couldn't shake the storm inside. "You're home early," Mark said, glancing up with a smile that faded as he saw my face. He set Mia in her playpen and turned to me, concern softening his features. "Everything okay?" I put the folder on the counter, feeling the weight of it settle between us. "Not really," I said quietly. "There's something I need to tell you. Something big." He dried his hands on a towel and leaned in, his full attention on me. So I told him. I told him about the new client, about the name on the file, about the past I'd spent years running from. I didn't spare the details. The orphanage, the way my family had chosen my brother over me, the headlines, the silence that came after. I let it all out, the words tumbling over each other, the pain and confusion and raw disbelief threaded through every sentence. Mark listened, his eyes never leaving mine. I could see the shock in his face, the way he struggled to fit the pieces together. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, then he spoke, his voice gentle but steady. "Let me get this straight. The family who left you, who made you feel like you didn't matter, is about to go bankrupt, and now you're the only one who can help them." I nodded, arms folded tight across my chest. It's surreal. I don't even know how to feel about it. Part of me wants to walk away, but I don't know if I can. He shook his head, searching my face. "What are you going to do? Are you really thinking about taking the case?" I let out a long sigh and looked at the ceiling, searching for answers that wouldn't come. "I'm not sure. I keep thinking I owe it to myself to at least meet with them, to see if anything's changed. Maybe that'll help me decide. I can't just ignore it. Not after everything." Mark came over and took my hands, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on my knuckles. "That's fair. So tell me, what would you do? Would you confront the past head-on, or let it go and walk away for good? Would you save them or finally put yourself first? I'm still deciding, and maybe your insight will help me figure out how this story ends. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Your support means everything. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter.